We are 3 weeks into the month of July, and here's where we stand so far on the overall temperature anomalies. You can definitely see it's been warmer than average across the Pacific Northwest and drier for those folks up there. But look along the West Coast into California, and especially there into San Francisco. They're having one of their chilliest summers on record so far. But into the middle of the country, it was a start of very wet conditions across Texas and Oklahoma that have kept the temperatures down with all the wet soil moisture across the middle part of the country. But as you swing out into the southeast, it's been above average and well above average across the mid Atlantic into the northeast. The water vapor imagery has been exceptionally high. That's only fueling those heat indices in the afternoon, where you do have numerous heat advisories, excessive heat warnings in place. So, overall, here's the setup right now on the satellite picture. We've got a couple areas of disturbed weather we're kind of highlighting. First, the monsoonal flow has been alive and well out West Texas into New Mexico. That's feeding up and over the ridge, and this is where most of the instability and the severe storms and some of the heavier rains will lie today across the Dakotas through Minnesota, but especially there into Wisconsin, into northern Wisconsin. And then further south, you got another dome of high pressure, and then you just have this pesky upper level low, another feature that have come up across, down off the southeast coast. That's swinging across Florida, and we have these conveyor belt of moisture, if you will. And this is actually the remnants of what was 93L last week, has actually swung back around up and over the ridge. And now it's extending, going to be going back into the Gulf, into more tropical type downpours, especially along the Gulf Coast regions. But here's the high pressure. This is where the high is currently right now. It's essentially over the southeast. That's where they've had most of the excessive heat warnings and heat watches and very high heat indice values. You can see the weakness of the ridge where you don't really see the darker reds or anything. That's where most of the instability, the cloud cover, and where it's allowed to rain under the more unsettled type air mass. And as this low kind of swings across on the northern periphery of the ridge, that's where we'll find most of the instability today, with all the severe threat across portions of Iowa, back into Minnesota, but especially into Wisconsin, where they do have an elevated upgraded risk for tornadoes today. So definitely be on high alert if you live in northern Wisconsin today. But further south, there's that tropical low that's off the southeast coast that's going to be swinging across Florida and just going to be adding to these tropical downpours along the Gulf Coast there. And overall, the precipitable water, it's very high water content, but most of the heavier showers and thunderstorms look to remain like out into the open waters of the Gulf. But you're still going to be getting some tropical downpours, especially along the beaches around the I-10, I-20 corridor. But look further north where you do see an elevated red. That is the combination of that northern periphery of the ridge, the boundary, and all the corn sweat they're been experiencing up there. That's only adding fuel to the water vapor into that atmosphere, and that's what's actually extending and fueling these higher dew points, elevating those heat indice values, putting in those excessive heat warnings, and adding to the abundance amount of precipitation once you're able to have all those things come together and produce some very heavy rain at times. But by the time we hit to Thursday, that high pressure will likely swing back to the west, and it's going to be located over much of the southern plains. I do feel Dallas finally gets their first 100-degree temperature of the season, as that high pressure, as they've been drier for the last 7 to 10 days now. And that will likely just kind of expand over the coming days across the south, as we'll be watching that low kind of swing around. So for the next couple of days, here's your overall air quality. We've got numerous ozone alert actions areas, as well as some unhealthy air quality out there. So all those areas in yellow, but especially those areas into orange. And then you do have a very unhealthy area up here towards Minnesota, where they do have some very high, unfortunately poor air quality for them. But overall, for the next 2 days, here's where the rain lies. So if you're along the monsoonal flow out in West Texas across New Mexico, but especially in the northern periphery of the ridge, where you're going to have all the kind of the ingredients to come together, where they do have the severe risk today and tomorrow, we could be looking at 1 to 3 inch totals across those regions. And there's the low pressure center that's off the southeast coast now, that's going to be swinging across Florida and eventually head back into the Gulf. But you can see most of the heavier precipitation for the next 2 days is actually going to be out in over water. But if you live along the coast, do feel like you're going to be getting some tropical downpours at times. And as this swing across, I mean, we're watching this. I mean, the National Hurricane Center has a 10% probability of this form, and it's likely not going to form. You know, the European guidance ensembles have about a 30% probability of it forming, kind of just what had happened last week. It's going to be just kind of too close to land and not going to have time to get going. But nonetheless, we kind of watch everything, this time of year. But as we head into going into Friday, that boundary just sinks a little bit further south. So now it's going to be associated and highlighted over Iowa, essentially into Illinois, as well as into Indiana. And again, the combination of the additional water vapor will add to those areas across the Corn Belt there, with increased higher water vapor content, increased dew points, just adds fuel to the fire. And then of course that's where you get that remnant low and the heavier rains, especially along the coast there into far southeast Texas into Louisiana. But look at the Cape values, your convective available potential energy. So yes, this is mainly, a lot of it's fueled by that additional water vapor of the corn sweat that's going to be happening up there across Iowa and Illinois and Indiana. That's also where we be getting some heavier rains, likely some flood warnings issued on Friday as well as into Saturday, as most of the instability is going to be elongated along that corridor. And that's the reason why you're seeing this red in the precipitable water index, is because of the higher water vapor content. And so you have that red area, as well as, of course, the other red areas with that little tropical low, that pesky little tropical low. That's where we're likely going to be, fighting the ridge as it tries to extend further west. But it's mainly going to be along the coastal areas into far southeast Texas, far east Texas, but especially Louisiana. Some of that heavier rain could extend into Arkansas as well deeper into the day on Friday, heading into Saturday. But the ridge will be shifting and expanding over a good part of the central U.S. as that low will be swinging around that ridge as we head into Sunday, going into that Monday timeframe, as things kind of heat up. And the same kind of general vicinity, overall setup is likely going to take shape. You've got the overall western periphery of the ridge of the monsoonal flow going to be alive and prevalent. And then on the northern periphery of that ridge, you got sinking air underneath, high and dry over Oklahoma and Texas. And yet again, we've got more instability that's going to be wrapping around, and it actually could come back for a third time. If you don't really change the overall weather pattern, you're going to get these lows that could be swinging around the ridge and getting back out into the Gulf again. And that's a probability there, especially what the National Hurricane Center is kind of looking at. And as we head towards the end of the month, I mean, all the additional water vapor content is, yes, we've got slight to moderate excessive heat likely taking place. This is the combination of the temperature and the heat indices, putting those in those criteria, especially with all the water vapor content in the atmosphere. That's going to be adding to those somewhat dangerous levels of heat index values at time 105, 110, even 115 in some of these areas. But again, the Climate Prediction Center has highlighted this is where we're at now, and it could swing back around again for a third time, believe it or not. So it's a low probability, again, off the southeast coast and there the upper Gulf Coast, that we could be looking at another little tropical wave coming across and taking that same general dynamic spin up and over that ridge and going back into the open waters So we'll have to watch that probability as the ridge continues to build as we flip the calendar into the start of March. I mean, going into August. Sorry, I wish it was March. So obviously August is the hottest month. So you've got a lot of heat building, but there is going to be a troughing try to take shape, especially across the Northeast, where you have actually been well above average for the month of July. You might actually get a little bit of a cool down as we flip the calendar heading into August. So guys, I appreciate you watching. At the end, there's actually a couple features that out into the open waters of the Atlantic. Of course, we've got this boundary. If this actually does form, it's actually not out of the realm of possibilities. There's a chance that it could form, and just like kind of Andrew, if it did form, it's just going to go well out in the open waters. But we also have a fairly robust low pressure center that's coming off the African coast, and that's going to swing into the main development region. It's been fairly quiet out there, but it does have a lot of higher water content precipitable values associated with it. So this actually has somewhat of a decent shot to try to form out there in the main development region before it actually gets to the Lesser Antilles. And so overall, the breakdown over the next 7 days kind of looks like this. Of course, the western regions continue to remain on the drier side. You've got the monsoonal flow continue to be alive and prevalent. And on the northern periphery of the ridge, that's where most of the instability and the severe storms and the heavier rains will likely fall across the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and into the Ohio Valley, portions of the mid-Atlantic into the Northeast. You've got the high pressure underneath that one, the sinking air over Oklahoma and Texas, and then you have these little low pressure centers that swing across. You've got one, and potentially another second one will add more rains to Florida, but heavier rains along the coast, I-10, I-20 corridor. Most of the heavier rains will be out in the open waters of the Gulf there, but nonetheless, we'll be watching these systems as we go into the end of July. So guys, I appreciate you watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch the next update. Why protect you before and after the storm.